What if everything you thought you knew about human history was wrong? Imagine for a moment, you're walking through a museum, surrounded by relics from a simpler time, stone tools, basic pottery, early script. This is the history we've been taught. But what if, deep in the forgotten corners of those vaults, or buried beneath layers of assumption, there existed objects that simply didn't belong? These aren't mistakes. They are anomalies. For centuries, human history has been a neat, linear story, from the Stone Age to the early civilizations of Sumer and Egypt, and eventually to the modern world. It's a comfortable, easy-to-understand progression, but lurking in the shadows of our past are the rogue discoveries. These are artifacts so baffling, so advanced, they utterly defy the timeline assigned to them. They suggest levels of scientific and technological sophistication that should have been impossible for the cultures that supposedly created them. These pieces hint at a completely different origin story for our species. We're talking about more than just curious trinkets. These objects are time bombs set to detonate the accepted historical narrative. They force us to ask the most profound questions. Were there advanced, forgotten cultures that preceded our known civilizations? Did ancient humans possess knowledge of electricity, global navigation, or astronomy that we are only now catching up to? Mainstream archaeology often dismisses these finds, labeling them hoaxes, anomalies, or simply misinterpretations. They are the out-of-place artifacts, the OOPArts. But today, we are shining a light on them, treating them not as curiosities to be ignored, but as evidence. We're talking about more than just curious trinkets. These objects are time bombs, set to detonate the accepted historical narrative. They force us to ask the most profound questions. Were there advanced, forgotten cultures that preceded our known civilizations? Did ancient humans possess knowledge of electricity, global navigation, or astronomy that we are only now catching up to? Mainstream archaeology often dismisses these finds, labeling them hoaxes, anomalies, or simply misinterpretations. They are the out-of-place artifacts, the OOPArts. But today, we are shining a light on them, treating them not as curiosities to be ignored, but as evidence. Get ready to question everything you've learned. We're about to open the Anomaly files. In this first deep dive, we'll uncover a mechanical computer built by the ancient Greeks, a 2,000-year-old electric battery, and a world map so accurate it shouldn't exist. Join us now as we journey into the rogue discoveries. Welcome to the Anomaly Files. We begin our deep dive into the objects that shouldn't exist, artifacts whose very presence rips holes in the fabric of established history. We start with a piece of technology so complex, historians have had to completely reevaluate the technological ceiling of the ancient world. Our first masterpiece out of time is the Antikythera Mechanism. Discovered in 1901 off the coast of the Greek island of Antikythera, this object was originally found in a corroded mass of bronze and wood, recovered from an ancient shipwreck dating back to around 60 to 150 BC. When fragments were cleaned and analyzed, what emerged was astounding. This wasn't just a navigational tool or a simple clock. It was, in effect, the world's first known analog computer. The mechanism consists of dozens of intricate, hand-cut bronze gears. Think of it, a level of mechanical sophistication involving differential gears and complex gearings that we didn't see again in Europe until the clockwork miracles of the 14th century, over 1,000 years later. So what did it do? The Antikythera Mechanism was an astronomical calculator. It could predict solar and lunar eclipses, track the cycles of the sun and moon, and even calculate the dates of ancient Greek games like the Olympics. It mapped the cosmos with jaw-dropping precision. The profound question here is not what it did, but how. Where did this technology come from? It suggests a highly developed, specialized school of mechanics in the Greek world, capable of mathematics and metalworking far beyond what was previously credited to them. Was the mechanism an isolated genius creation by a single person like Archimedes, or was it a product of a lost technological tradition that vanished with the decline of the Hellenistic period? The answer remains buried beneath the waves of history, but the mechanism itself stands as undeniable proof that the ancients were capable of things we are only beginning to truly appreciate. Next, we move east to the Middle East, specifically to a 1930s discovery near Baghdad, Iraq. This artifact is deceptively simple, yet potentially revolutionary. The Baghdad Battery. It's an object dating to the Parthian era, roughly 250 BC to AD 224. What exactly is it? It's a terracotta jar about 5.5 inches tall, containing a copper cylinder which encases an iron rod. Crucially, the top of the copper cylinder was sealed with asphalt, a perfect insulator. The accepted scientific consensus is that if this jar were filled with an acidic liquid, such as vinegar, grape juice, or even a basic copper sulfate solution, it would function as a simple galvanic cell, producing a low-voltage electrical current. Now the debate rages. If it was a battery, what was its purpose? One theory suggests it was used for electroplating, a process where a thin layer of gold or silver is chemically deposited onto a cheaper base metal for jewelry or artifacts. The alternative, and less exciting, theory is that the jar was simply used for storing sacred scrolls or herbs, and the metal components are incidental. But the what-if is too compelling to ignore. If the Baghdad Battery was, in fact, a source of practical electricity, it means the knowledge of generating electric current predates Alessandro Volta's work by nearly 2 millennia. If ancient artisans were using electroplating, imagine the hidden layers of technological sophistication we have missed in their workshops. For us, a battery is commonplace. For them, it could have been a tool for magic, for ritual, or for advanced manufacturing. The very possibility challenges the core narrative of scientific discovery. Finally, we turn our attention to the age of exploration, but with a monumental twist. Our third anomaly is the Piri Reis Map, compiled in 1513 by the Ottoman admiral and cartographer Piri Reis. The map itself is authenticated and held in a museum in Turkey. It's an incredible document that depicts the coasts of Western Europe, North Africa, Brazil, and the Caribbean. For a 16th century map, its accuracy is astonishing. It displays longitude with a precision that was supposedly unattainable before the invention of the marine chronometer in the 18th century. But the most controversial and compelling aspect lies at the southern edge of the map. It depicts a coastline that strongly resembles the northern shore of Antarctica, a continent officially undiscovered until 1820. Furthermore, the coastline appears to be drawn without ice. Geologists confirm that this part of the Antarctic coast has not been ice-free for at least 6,000 years. Piri Reis himself claimed he compiled the map from older source materials, some of which dated back to the time of Alexander the Great. This raises an explosive possibility. If the map is accurate, it means either Piri Reis had access to unknown, highly advanced ancient source maps, or that a sophisticated global civilization existed thousands of years ago, before the last ice age, capable of accurate global surveying and cartography. Were these source maps relics of a pre-Diluvian world? The Piri Reis Map is not just a geographical curiosity, it's a terrifying whisper from a civilization we have completely forgotten, suggesting a global reach and technological capability that existed long before recorded history began. In the last segment, we saw evidence of advanced technology in places it shouldn't be. Now, we're going to explore artifacts that challenge not just what the ancients knew, but who they met. We are diving into the world of trans-oceanic mysteries, artifacts that whisper of global travel and communication millennia before Columbus or even the Vikings. We begin in Mesoamerica, with one of the most stunning and culturally significant finds on the continent. The Olmec Colossal Heads. The Olmec civilization is considered the mother culture of Mesoamerica, flourishing in the lowlands of south-central Mexico from roughly 1500 BC to 400 BC. They built massive ceremonial centers and developed sophisticated art, and their most famous legacy is these enormous basalt sculptures. To date, 17 have been discovered. They are massive, some standing up to 9 feet tall and weighing over 40 tons. Moving these gigantic stones from quarries miles away to the Olmec heartland was an incredible feat of engineering alone. But the anomaly here isn't the size, it's the faces. These heads depict individual men wearing helmet-like headgear. But what has sparked decades of intense debate is the startling realism of their facial features. The faces exhibit traits that many scholars and observers argue are distinctly African, notably broad noses, full lips, and a muscular jawline. These features contrast sharply with the known physical characteristics of indigenous Mesoamerican populations. If these colossal heads, central to the Olmec culture and dating back 3,000 years, depict people of African descent, what does that imply? It throws a massive wrench into the established historical timeline, suggesting that African individuals or groups traveled across the Atlantic and had a significant cultural presence in the New World thousands of years before the accepted timeline of global contact. Naturally, mainstream archaeology offers alternatives. They argue that the features are simply a highly stylized artistic convention used by the Olmec to represent powerful rulers, and that the perceived African traits are simply a consequence of the thick, heavy features created by carving massive basalt boulders. However, the debate persists because the resemblance is so striking, and because these heads represent the earliest monumental sculptures in Mesoamerica. If the Olmec were the original culture, and they were depicting non-indigenous people, we have to seriously reconsider the possibility of forgotten African voyages and the exchange of culture and perhaps even technology across the Atlantic. It's a challenge to the isolated, pristine narrative of New World development. Now we cross down to South America, to the dry coastal plains of Peru, where we encounter an anomaly that is often aggressively dismissed, the Ica stones. The Ica stones are thousands of andesite rocks, ranging in size from small pebbles to large boulders, found primarily near the city of Ica. What makes them notorious is the incredibly detailed imagery carved onto their dark surface. The imagery on these stones, if authenticated, would represent the single greatest challenge to modern scientific understanding. They depict scenes that absolutely should not exist in the same artifact. First, detailed illustrations of humans interacting with creatures identified as dinosaurs. You see carvings of men riding what appear to be sauropods, or battling a triceratops or a stegosaurus, creatures supposedly extinct for over 65 million years. Second, advanced technological and medical knowledge. Some stones show complex surgical procedures, including brain transplants and cesarean sections. Other carvings appear to show telescopes or even aerial maps. For context, the Ica stones are generally attributed by their collectors to the pre-Columbian Ica culture, but the carvings themselves depict a knowledge base far exceeding anything known in that time. The official consensus position from the scientific community is unequivocal. The Ica stones are modern hoaxes. This determination stems primarily from the lack of verifiable archaeological context, meaning they were not recovered from a controlled dig site, and the confession of the local farmer who sold many of the stones. However, the story is complicated. The sheer volume, tens of thousands of stones, and the consistency of the intricate details present a logistical nightmare for a single modern forger. The depth of knowledge represented in the astronomical and medical carvings is also incredibly hard to fake on such a massive scale. So we are left with a massive contradiction. Are these the most elaborate and successful hoaxes in archaeological history, designed to mislead and profit? Or are they genuine artifacts, dismissed purely because their content is too radical, too paradigm-shifting? If they are real, they suggest that either ancient humanity survived a cataclysm alongside dinosaurs, or that a hidden, hyper-advanced civilization existed, capable of manipulating genetic material or possessing complex medical knowledge, a civilization that was completely erased from the annals of time. This is where history stops being a linear narrative and starts becoming a terrifying puzzle. We've challenged the timeline of engineering and the history of global contact. Now let's return to the ultimate anomaly, the question of ancient power. We are moving to Egypt, the land of pharaohs, pyramids, and incredible secrets. If the Baghdad battery whispered of electricity, our next discovery screams it from the walls of a temple. Our focus is the Temple of Hathor at Dendera. Built during the late Ptolemaic period, this temple contains hidden crypts and chambers filled with intricate relief carvings. Many of these carvings depict standard scenes of worship and ritual, but one particular set of reliefs in a crypt below the main sanctuary stands out as completely foreign to the Egyptian lexicon. These carvings show large, bulb-like objects, resembling gigantic versions of modern light bulbs. Inside these bulbs, a serpent-like filament is depicted, extending from a lotus flower base. The base itself is connected to what appears to be a power source, where a deity known as the Jed pillar, often interpreted as a symbol of stability and conductivity, is being handled by a human figure. The interpretation that sends shivers down the spine of conventional history is this: these reliefs are a schematic diagram of an ancient electrical lighting system. Why would the Egyptians need this? Consider the tombs and crypts. When early archaeologists first explored these structures, they noticed a peculiar absence of soot. If ancient Egyptians had only relied on torches and oil lamps, the standard method of illumination at the time, the enclosed chambers and long, narrow corridors should have been blackened with carbon residue. But they weren't. This suggests the presence of a clean light source. Skeptics argue, and it's a valid point, that the carving is purely symbolic. The serpent is the god Harsamtis, the lotus symbolizes creation, and the Jed pillar is purely religious, a representation of Osiris's backbone. It's an allegory, not an instruction manual. But the physical resemblance to modern technology is difficult to ignore. If we accept the possibility of ancient electrical knowledge, perhaps harnessed from static electricity or a more sophisticated version of the Baghdad battery, then the Dendera light becomes the blueprint for illuminating the unsuited tombs. It's an architectural and technological mystery wrapped up in the complex tapestry of Egyptian mythology. The Dendera light is just the most visually compelling example of ancient technological ambiguity. The historical record is littered with these whispers of lost science. Let me give you two more quick examples to drive home the point that the anomalies are widespread. First, the Koso artifact. Discovered in 1961 by mineral collectors in California, this artifact was found encased within a hard geode. The problem? Geodes take millions of years to form. When X-rayed and later cut open, the object inside was identified as a seemingly man-made porcelain or ceramic cylinder with a copper core. It looks exactly like a modern spark plug. If this artifact is indeed an object made by an advanced civilization millions of years ago, it means everything we know about human evolution is utterly and completely wrong. Mainstream analysis dismisses it, suggesting the geode may be a rapid accumulation of iron oxides around a 1920s spark plug, not a genuine geode formation. But the initial discovery and the geological claim continue to fuel the debate. Second, we look to the Sumerians and the advanced nature of their astronomical tables and star charts. Dating back thousands of years, these clay tablets contain computations and observational data that are astonishingly precise. They track planetary movements with a complexity that suggests long-term, sophisticated observation. How did they achieve this level of astronomical modeling without telescopes or complex mathematics supposedly not developed until much later by the Greeks? It suggests that the foundations of science were being built on a much higher, much earlier platform than we credit them for. From Egyptian temples hinting at light bulbs, to million-year-old spark plugs, to Sumerian celestial knowledge, these anomalies, these rogue discoveries, constantly push back against the comfortable boundaries we have set for our own history. These artifacts are like puzzle pieces from a different box. They don't fit the picture we are trying to create. And that brings us to the most crucial question of all. Why are these pieces so systematically ignored, categorized, and relegated to the fringes of history? Let's explore the gatekeepers of the past in our final major segment. We have seen the evidence: mechanical computers 1,000 years ahead of their time, maps of an ice-free Antarctica, and carvings suggesting knowledge of electricity. The question is no longer what these artifacts suggest, but why they remain outside the official history books. Why is there such a strong institutional resistance to the concept of rogue discoveries? The simple official answer lies in the problem of the OOPArt, the out-of-place artifact. Mainstream archaeology has established rigorous standards for accepting evidence, and these standards are what often consign our rogue discoveries to the dusty bin of anomalies. The first and most crucial requirement is provenance. This means the artifact must be found in a controlled, recorded archaeological excavation with clear geological dating and context. The Antikythera Mechanism found in a datable shipwreck passes this test. The Ica stones, on the other hand, failed dramatically. They were primarily bought from local farmers without verifiable records of where or when they were unearthed. Without a solid chain of custody, the scientific community must, by its own rules, assume the highest probability of a modern hoax or an elaborate fraud. It's a harsh rule, but it's designed to protect the integrity of the historical record against sensationalism and profit. The same problem plagues the Koso artifact, found by surface collectors, not trained experts in a stratified layer. Secondly, there is the issue of misinterpretation. The Baghdad battery is a perfect example. Is it an electric cell, or is it a vessel used for storing sacred scrolls or herbs? Since we cannot observe the ancients using it, the simplest explanation, the storage use, is often preferred over the extraordinary claim of electric power. In science, the rule is clear. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Scientists must be able to replicate the artifact's function and provide a compelling reason why a culture would develop such a complex tool only to seemingly abandon the knowledge completely. When the evidence is only suggestive, like the serpent carving in the Dendera light, it is categorized as symbolic or mythological, not as an engineering blueprint. The burden of proof for overturning centuries of established knowledge is, rightly, incredibly high. Beyond the scientific method, there is the powerful factor of resistance to a paradigm shift. History is a massive, intricate jigsaw puzzle. Every accepted date, every theory on human migration, every technological milestone, they are all interconnected pieces. The history we teach today is internally consistent. It works. Now, imagine dropping the Piri Reis Map or the Olmec Heads into that puzzle. These are pieces from a completely different box. To accept them means not just adding a new detail, but potentially invalidating every textbook, every permanent museum exhibit, and every theory on New World settlement. This institutional resistance is not a malicious conspiracy. It is the inertia of established knowledge. It is simply easier, safer, and more palatable for the majority to label the anomaly an outlier or a fraud than to allow it to shatter the entire structure of conventional history. The gatekeepers of history are protecting a fragile, yet widely accepted consensus. And that brings us to our final point. You must become the critical voice in this debate. We've completed our journey through the rogue discoveries. We sailed the ancient oceans with the Piri Reis Map, seeing a coastline of Antarctica that shouldn't have been mapped for another 300 years. We stood in ancient Greece, watching a sophisticated Antikythera Mechanism predict the movement of the heavens with gears not seen again for a millennium. We touched the walls of the Dendera temple, pondering if the ancient Egyptians held the secret of clean light. And we confronted the unsettling possibility of trans-oceanic contact, thanks to the Olmec Colossal Heads. These anomalies, these OOPArts, force us to confront a vital truth. History is not a finished book. It is a constantly evolving investigation. The current narrative is the result of evidence that has been accepted and evidence that has been dismissed. And often, the evidence that gets dismissed is simply the evidence that is too challenging, too expensive, or too disruptive to confirm. It's easy to fall into one of two traps. The first trap is to dismiss everything outright, labeling it all as fraud, mistake, or conspiracy. The second trap is to believe everything uncritically, abandoning logic for sensationalism. The path of true discovery lies in the middle. We urge you to become a critical archaeologist of your own history. For every object we've discussed, the Baghdad battery, the Ica stones, the Koso artifact, you must apply a rigorous mental test. Ask yourself, does the claim of advanced technology overcome the very real counterarguments of provenance and hoaxing? Does the physical evidence, like the non-suited ceilings of the Egyptian tombs, lend more weight to the extraordinary interpretation? The goal is not to prove that ancient aliens visited Earth or that every wild claim is true. The goal is to refuse to be satisfied with the easy answer. If a civilization was capable of designing a device as complex as the Antikythera Mechanism, how many other secrets did they possess that were simply lost to time, erosion, or deliberate destruction? These rogue discoveries are the scars left behind by a forgotten past. The future of our past depends on this continued curiosity. These artifacts challenge the inertia of established knowledge, and it takes a community of open-minded thinkers to keep the debate alive. Now, we turn the investigation over to you. What is your favorite rogue discovery that we didn't mention? Perhaps the incredible uniformity of the Puma Punku stonework? Or the mystery of the Voynich manuscript? Do you believe the Baghdad battery was used for electroplating, or was it purely ritualistic? Share your theories, your links to further research, and your thoughts on which piece of accepted history is most likely to fall apart next. Like this video if you believe history needs to be constantly challenged, subscribe for more deep dives into the unexplained, and most importantly, join the conversation in the comments below. Thank you for journeying with us beyond the textbooks. Keep questioning, keep discovering.